So, good morning, everyone. And if it's afternoon for you, or if it's early morning, or if you're joining from somewhere else, so welcome to Chai Time. So, this is Sadea's Chai Time panel discussions where stories of adaptation, South Asian model minority myths, perceptions and perspectives, challenges and growth are shared through a long living tradition of sharing a cup of chai. So, as South Asians, we are all familiar with chai and most of us love chai. But if you're a coffee drinker, maybe you can bring a cup of coffee and you can join us as well. But if you love tea, then perhaps you can drink tea and share with all these and talk to us about all these tough conversations that we've been having. So, today we are continuing the topic, what does it mean to be a South Asian design educator in the United States? So we started discussing in May, and it's very broad topic to unpack, right? So please feel free to share your stories of success, adaptation, perceptions, and challenges. We hope these conversations will support and empower each other and upcoming educators from South Asia. This will also open pathways for new dialogues within design education and reach greater audiences. So, who am I? I'm Archana Shekhara. I'm the founder and chair of South Asian Design Educators Alliance, and you're joining Chai Time. And I have my colleagues here as well. So, I would love for each one of you to unmute and then share who you are. Mohammed, please, can you share about yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you, Archana. My name is Mohammed Rahman. I'm an assistant professor of design in the School of Design at University of Cincinnati in Ohio. I don't know if you know DAP. That's where I am. And I'm the secretary of Sadia. We have been working together for a year now. Yeah, welcome to Chat Time.
So, Gautam?
Yeah, hi. My name is Gautam Rao. I'm an associate professor of art at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, and a proud member of SADEA. And been really happy to be a member of the group and participate in a variety of the activities.
Thank you, Mohammed and Gautam. Sorry, Mohammed, I forgot to say thanks for all of the amazing work that you have been doing with us. And thank you, Gautam. Sana?
Hi everyone, I'm Sana. I'm an assistant professor at San Francisco State University where I teach visual design. So Sabia, you and I are in close proximity. Yeah, I joined Sadea and it's been great. And it's really nice to meet all the other South Asian designers. Yeah.
Thank you, Sana. Sana is one of our newest members, and really pleased that she can contribute and being a part of the student mentorship committee specifically. So thank you, Sana. Rushali?
Shadi Anil Dhage. I am a faculty at Otis College of Art and Design. I work remotely and I'm based out of San Francisco Bay Area. And I have been an art historian focusing on practices in Global South, and I'm also an art curator. And this is my first chai time, and I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Rushali, for joining us. Sabiha?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sabiha. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm joining from occupied Ohlone territories, also known as Oakland, California. I teach a course called Design and Social Change in the University of San Francisco's Art and Architecture Department. And I also am a docent at the Letterform Archive. And my work is focused primarily on trying to develop tools for decolonizing graphic design education, especially for undergraduates. So very, very grateful and honored to be part of this discussion.
Thank you so much, Sabiha, for joining us. So I know Vrishali and Sabiha, you're all new to Sadea and Sadea's event, so we welcome wholeheartedly. And thank you so much for spending your early morning with us. So appreciate. And Sana is also joining from the Bay Area as well. So it's early morning for you all. And Thank you so much. So I want to continue where I left off. So we began our conversation in May about South Asian visibility and inclusion. We talked about owning our spaces, finding ways to build network, community, and belonging, our ethics and perceptions to work harder, seeking representation and sometimes validation too. We talked about microaggressions in the classroom space, suggested teaching strategies, that's not working for us because sometimes those strategies work for a few other people, especially the dominant communities. Perhaps those kind of strategies don't work for us because of our own cultural differences and experiences and the struggles that we all encounter so people can look beyond our brownness. We talked about positionality and transparency in the classroom and recognizing to unlearn and accepting challenges and finding new strategies that will actually work for us. We discussed about promotion and tenure last December for Chai Time, so that we have talked about it. And thanks to all the participants for their vibrant and honest discussions, and I look forward to the same today as well. So today I would love for everyone to engage in talks about collaborations, opportunities, and challenges within the university or community. How about mentorships? How do we find South Asian faculty mentors or BIPOC faculty mentors who can support our teaching and research endeavors? Also, if we have time, we can perhaps address recognition versus tokenism and taxation and end with various strategies that has worked for us to feel safe, understood, accepted, and respected. So maybe we can start talking about collaborations. So, Sabiha, just before we turned on the record button, you were talking about collaborations and how sometimes collaborations work greatly, or sometimes it might not, even opportunities. So, if all of us can chat a little bit about collaborations, opportunities, and challenges within the university, if you're in academia, and most of us are all in academia, and then community collaborations as well. How do the community look at us because we are different? But Sabiha, you're a part of the letter form archive as well. And each one, and Mohammed is a part of DAP, Gautam is in Butler, Sana is in San Francisco University, along with Vrushali as well. So can we chat about that so we can unpack? Feel free to mute and chat. Or if you want to raise your hand and I can be like, okay, this is the person who wants to go first.
Well, I can start. I feel like I'm very new to this space, so forgive me if I'm reviewing things that you've already deeply unpacked with each other. But one of the reasons why I wanted to join you all and meet you all was because I know I had so many imposter feelings when I first started teaching. I think my entire growing up as the daughter of Muslim Gujarati immigrants in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1980s and 90s. And pursuing graphic design studies in college, all of my professors, all of my grade school, high school teachers were all white, with just a couple exceptions. And so my perception of what it meant to be an educator was really, there was a lot of internalized racism, around what I was even qualified for. And so the idea of teaching was something I didn't think I could do. And so it took a lot to unlearn those systems of oppression for myself. And as I've been able to, thanks to a lot of really supportive folks within the institutions I was lucky to join, I've been thinking then, like, how do I pay that forward as well? And what is it that we are doing for each other to make space when we kind of feel closed off from opportunity, either real or imagined?
Sabiha, believe it or not, Mohammed and we were just chatting about it before you all came in to this space. Less about maybe 20 minutes ago. We were talking about the second generation folks here who are designers also in academia. So we were like, maybe that's a chai time topic in itself because most of us are immigrants and we bring with us our immigrant experiences and we look at the world in that lens, right? The cultural differences, because we are all learning and we are trying to unpack. But then for you and also for that matter, Gautam, both of you have born and brought up in this country. Your experiences are very different. And like how you said, the educators, there's not much representation, even though like for us, I mean, maybe I teach in a white institution and then our students are predominantly white. And then so I'm perhaps the first Indian educator they are encountering. And then here I'm trying to teach design histories. And then they're like, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't look the same. But here I'm talking with an accent, and then I have my own experiences. But then what you and Gautam bring and experience is very different from what we experience, right? And Rushali, for that matter, is teaching virtually. So that's a totally different experience, right? And then so Gautam, do you have anything to add to what Sabiha said in terms of like growing up? And we would love to have a chai time just focusing on both of your experiences and bring in other folks as well, similar who have shared similar experiences with like you both. So Gautam, do you have anything to add in terms of representation?
I mean, I think that's true. I think that there's, that phrase like ABCD has always has been there for decades at this point. Like the sense that I mean, I think in some ways there's definitely commonalities. Like, I never had faculty that were, I mean, we didn't have like South Asian faculty or anything like that. I mean, even currently, I'm teaching at an institution that's probably less diverse than I think, a large university on the coast or something like that. Like I think that some of the larger institutions tend to be, much more diverse in terms of student body and faculty and things like that. But that idea, like I know that people of like my generation, that sense that we're not American enough to be American and not Indian enough to be Indian. And we are sort of like caught in between, you know, both generations. I think that's certainly true. And then that sense of like kind of growing up and getting into the career, things like that. I mean, I certainly I think we all I think it's a fairly universal idea of the sense of like we get told. I mean, I was lucky, like my parents, my mother was supportive, but we definitely had people around us who were like, you know, you want to go into this field, like why would you want to do that? And like, it's essentially like it's almost like imposter. It's an interesting take on imposter syndrome because it's essentially people who are not in the field telling you that you shouldn't be in it. So that I think it's an interesting kind of perspective there, and I think it is. I think you make an excellent point that it is a different experience. It's not quite the same experience, and those differences are. They can be kind of like pronounced. I mean, I like as a young person, I moved to India. I lived in India for 5 years, from the age of like 9 to 13. So I sort of I did have that experience, but it's just that sense of like being caught within two countries, two perspectives. It's definitely something that needs to be explored a lot more.
Thank you for sharing that, Gautam. Like, especially when you come from a different country and then you have real experiences back home in India for 5 years, and then you come here and then you're working with students, and we are the minority no matter where we go, especially in terms of design, and then finding our own paths to navigate. So I'm sure that's challenging. And imposter syndrome is so real. And for us, first generation folks, the way we look at imposter syndrome is a little different, right? And Mohammed and Sana, Rushali, do you all have anything to share? And we are joined by Wendy. Wendy, do you want to introduce yourself if possible? Maybe I'm not sure about the connection. Anyway, so Mohammed, Sana, and Vishali, would you like to share anything, add anything?
Vishali, go ahead.
Yeah, so my experience in this idea of having lived here is quite short. So I think I won't comment on that. But I think what I'll get into the discussion is my students' experiences, some of whom come from a larger Southeast Asian spread, and they struggle now at this point. Some who are born here and some who have just moved in as foreign students, the idea of navigating through a language, that is, whether how much do we represent about our story, quote unquote our story, and the other who have been raised here, or who have been practicing artists here, when they try to address what we call as the root culture, uh, what comes in their work. So is it about radical issues which are being addressed by students who have a lived experience in Southeast Asian countries, to the ones for whom all those narrations are basically passed on secondhand? So, what we see is a space of primary practice, within the, I would say within the land of whatever the happening is, and the other is where it's acquired. And I think that for me is very interesting, both as a person in academics and also as a curator, because when we curate shows and when we say Southeast Asia, it's difficult to put these two categories together. And I think that is something, which I would like to discuss in over the period.
Thank you, Vishali. Mohammed, you were saying something, please.
No, I thought Vishali was trying to say something and then Wendy joins in. So I welcomed her to say. I think I'll maybe just to change tangent a bit. I think for collaboration, what I feel is when you're new, I mean, when you're not from here, it's always hard to, it's not quite imposter syndrome, but it's always hard to get networking. Like, for example, your connections to the right people. It's like a lot of digging all the time. So that sometimes, let's say, like it's always like the refreshing introduction to what you're doing to everybody. That takes a long while. So even for a like a tenure track position over here, it's really hard to get those connections, and it's hard to get. So for example, that's why I'm here in Sadia, because I think that's what we needed. It's not like the resources are not there, but the resources are not accumulated in a way so that we can share them or we can network it together. So that's something that I feel because I joined as a full-timer in during the pandemic. So those soft skills were really hard when we were like online for 2 years. And now it's getting, but the track, like the whole clock of tenure track, that has a different speed as well. But I'm just saying for a academic position, like if you're really on a tenure track, it's really hard to get those networking and get people convinced about things that you are going through. That's a hard point for many like first generation faculty members.
Anybody else want to add anything for this? Welcome, Shreya. Sabiha.
Sorry to jump back in. I really appreciate hearing it from everyone. And one thing that's coming up right now for me is what assumptions we might be making of each other too, given our different
Mm.
migration stories. And there's dominant narratives in the United States about what it means to be a South Asian immigrant or to be growing up South Asian. And Archana, you mentioned the model minority things. Like I certainly, as a child of growing up in Silicon Valley in the 1980s and 90s, I certainly benefited from the model
Mm.
minority myth. And I've had to really do lifelong work to unpack how I've been implicated in white supremacy, maintaining white supremacy and anti-Black racism within our institutions. But there's also this other layer of um, being South Asian often gets, we assume like, oh, you're Indian and you're Hindu. And knowing that the diaspora is very diverse and that within the diaspora there are instances of violence and oppression, there's anti-caste repression, there is anti-Muslim repression, anti-Sikh repression. In India in particular, we see a fascist Hindu supremacist regime that has been very much supported by a lot of members of the South Asian diaspora. At the same time, instances of violence are happening within our own communities. And so how can we lift up the realities that our diaspora includes people who are from Kashmir and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and who experience these kinds of dynamics even within the South Asian space. And I think that that can also be a hurdle to building our relationships and our mentorship and collaboration and networks if we don't do that trust building with each other too. Certainly, I've felt very invisible as a Muslim Gujarati person at a time when violence was happening against Muslims in Gujarat, and being the only Muslim in the South Asian room can feel really scary. So those are things that I'm also really looking to also not make assumptions about other communities so that we're not treating each other as monoliths.
Thank you for bringing that up because we recently did this call for posters for peace in an Indian context. So we had designers joining from India and also designers from here create posters about peace. And then we received a various range of like very diverse range of concepts and themes. And then we also hosted a discussion over the summer. So designers joined from India and also here. And then there was a discussion for an hour or so. And then we are taking this exhibition because it's like, yes, exhibition is great, but then advocacy, like how does it lead to advocacy? So thanks for bringing that up, Sabiha. And if it's not too late, if you want to contribute to a poster, you are more than welcome to join us. And then I can send you more information about it. Um, but Sana has something to say. Please, Sana.
Yeah, I would just jump on what Sabiha said because so I did go to a white institute here where I got my I went there for school, but I also taught there for like 5 years, and then I moved to California, which is so diverse, so two different worlds that I was living in. Um, but what really, because I am Pakistani, and so that's clubbed as into Middle East instead of South Asia, according to the Americans, right? So it's a very kind of weird, you're kind of trying to, you know, um, make space for yourself, but you don't know what space is there for you. Because when you go to, like Sabia mentioned, to a South Asian space, uh, case in point right now, there are gonna be a lot of, because of the also the immigration and the population, there's always gonna be a lot more Indians than any other South Asians. If you go to a Middle Eastern space, there's always gonna be more Persians or Arabs, and so you're always kind of like trying to figure out your space as well. And then it's really um and this is my personal like journey because I was in Indiana and I was like, in a very white space, but it was, I think I felt there were spaces in California where I felt more unwelcome because of the internalized like racism or whatever than being in a place that was more homogenous like in Indiana. So that was something, but over time, what I've learned is people are accepting. They just need to get to know you a little better. But because of our initial like prejudice or point or perspective, we're very people tend to project certain things or ideas that so, for example, this recently happened. Just a really small example. Like, I was talking to a student, and it was their last day, and they were just thanking me, and yada yada, and they are from here, and so, and then late, and they asked me, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, "Yeah, I grew up in Pakistan," and so they went and then they sent me an email and then they were like the email was like, "Oh, I hope your family is doing okay because I've heard this and I've heard that." And I just felt like it was really unfair to assume that my family is suffering where we're very comfortable and it was very unfair to assume that just because you're from a certain part that you're gonna be facing certain things, right? And I do come from a very privileged. I was privileged growing up, and I grew up in a very safe environment, whatever. But and I know that person was coming from like a kind place just to check in, whatever. But I was also like, why did you assume that I'm probably a refugee here, or why did you assume that there's just you know things are not right or things were not right when I was growing up. Where from my perspective, I thought they were. So just a little nugget that I shared.
That's a whole topic in itself in terms of identities and perceptions, where people, as soon as you say you're from India, people just assume that you're a Hindu, and then you have all these Hindu values, right? And then um, but then it's tough, isn't it? I mean, when I'm actually going home tomorrow to going to India for a visit, so I can wear whatever, I can speak wherever, I have all that privilege. But then, whereas the minority communities don't have that, and it's very visible, right? Talking about the government, that's a whole different topic. Wow. So, I mean, I thank you for sharing your truth, both Sena and also Sabiha. We really appreciate that. And maybe that's a chai time topic in future. But then, as South Asians, have we ever felt where there is that hesitation for people to collaborate with us, or is it welcoming? People are maybe I mean, what I have noticed especially after Black Lives Matter as an organization came up, right? And because of need, when that organization came, then all of a sudden minoritized identities felt empowered, right? So we were like, okay, maybe the Black folks are really talking about their struggles, their identities, and carving a space for themselves, which has been happening for 30, 40 years, like many years or more than that. But I mean, something happened after Black Lives Matter came out, right? And then the country was different, especially after the murders of George Floyd and several others. Um, but then we as South Asians, at least me as a human being, felt like, how can we talk about our stories? We have struggles as well, as with a lot of respect and humility to the Black folks. How can we share our own struggles and challenges? Not again, our struggles and challenges are still privileged when compared to the Black identities. But then, so how can we carve our own paths? And when we talk about collaborations, maybe now, in recent times, people do recognize South Asian identities, but then we still struggle with community collaborations. Not everybody in the community is welcoming and be like, okay, I'm going to collaborate with you, or talk about interdisciplinary collaboration. So there is all these hurdles. Have you all found that at all, or has it been a smooth sailing and everybody's like, yeah, we want to collaborate with you? Anyone? Sana?
I think what I've noticed that people are more willing to collaborate if it's neutral topics, right? When you're going to talk about like classroom or education or pedagogy. But if it's sensitive and important topics, that's when people tend to waver away, because they don't want to be clubbed into, uh, and I don't know if it's like, if it's because they don't want to be associated with it, or they don't feel like it's their narrative to share, or they don't want to take space from. But it's always like, it really depends on, from what I felt like, if it's sensitive or important topics, then people tend to be a little like, okay, let's not. But if it's like very neutral, very technical topics, people are willing to collaborate. That's been my personal experience, yeah.
I think you just hit the nail. That is so true, right? When neutral topics, everybody's like, yes, I'll do it with you. But as soon as you talk about something sensitive, especially sociocultural dynamics, and then that's a like, oh my gosh, I think I want to stay away. Or otherwise, you're labeled as a troublemaker. Because I'm a big troublemaker. I'm always labeled as that. But Sabia?
I've also been speaking a lot. Did anyone else want to respond to Sana first?
No, no, no. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Feel free.
No, this is such a juicy topic. It's so helpful to hear this though, because I've actually had uh, quite the opposite experience where I have found my grounding, my motivation, and my trusted relationships by leaning into those intersections of racial justice and solidarity. And actually, I've been working at the intersection of social justice activism and graphic design for 20 years as part of a collective called Design Action Collective. And incidentally, we actually made the original Black Lives Matter logo because of long-term organizing relationships with Alicia and Patrice and Opal, who had founded hashtag Black Lives Matter. So because of investing in the relationships that allow us to build power in multiracial coalitions and have unified efforts towards collective liberation, those opportunities emerge, though, because we're investing in each other. So I've been really fortunate to have my political education and my design education very linked. And so my politicization around understanding anti-Black racism in the wake of the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement then gave me the opportunity to think about what is my responsibility as a South Asian. And when we lean into that, I think that there's an authenticity that can come from that work. So we're not feeling like, oh, I have to censor myself or I have to um, perform a certain story that's not my story, but to be honest about who we are and then embrace our responsibilities with our relationships to power. And so I really appreciate hearing though the realities in academia that you feel like you cannot sometimes do that. You have to avoid certain quote unquote sensitive topics in order to maintain your job security or maintain your grant funding or whatever it is. And we are going to just get more of that as we head into a new and dangerous Trump administration that has explicitly promised a crackdown on academic freedom when it comes to racial justice. So, and we're already seeing that at our universities when it comes to solidarity with Palestine and international solidarity across anti-fascist, transnational fascist movements. So I'm really interested in how we can keep in touch with each other and have each other's back as academics when our opposition comes for us, and knowing that South Asians may be uniquely impacted in certain ways. It's not the same as the way that Black folks or Filipino folks or Palestinian folks are impacted by these systems. But where can we find those points of solidarity? That's what I believe will help us actually survive and thrive versus having to feel like we're very separate or siloed.
I think being there for each other. I think so. That's one of the aims for Sadea is like that allyship and being there for each other. So Sadea becomes a platform so where all of us feel safe to talk and share stories. And then like Sabiha, like how you have been talking about some of these pressing issues. But then I also wonder Is it because Sana and Sabiha, you both are in a more larger kind of diasporic presence, like South Asian diasporic presence? Is that why you feel that people have been a little more supportive? And then I'm in a small town of just 120,000 people. So even though Illinois State University is we call ourselves as a large college, but a small, like classroom sizes or whatever, like, small school of 20,000 students. But then it's a rural town in central Illinois. Lots of people come from suburbs of Chicago and things like that. Of course, they're a little more broader in terms of views, but then it's hard. It's very difficult to collaborate. So how do people in small towns navigate? I wonder. Like, I mean, people have looked at me and wanted to collaborate with whatever ideas I bring and participate in advocacy. But then there is also this sense of tokenism. So how can we because I feel like I've been tokenized several times. The recognition in the beginning feels like, oh, I'm being noticed. Oh, that sounds kind of awesome. And then you realize, wait a minute, there is something else, right? And then so that's when you start thinking about, and then you start thinking about, where do I stand? What's my positionality? Do I step back? Do I keep going? And then after tokenism, then suddenly it becomes taxation because then you're trying to do so many things because you're asked for to be on so many different committees and whatnot. So what about that? Have you all experienced anything like in terms of being tokenized or called super tokens? That's what Dori Tungstall has been calling, and then working on her new book about super tokenism. So, what's that like? I love this thinking pause.
Hi, I can share something. I'm actually I'm not an educator. I actually just recently graduated from Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers, so I can speak more from like a student perspective. I was lucky enough where I feel like Mason Gross was pretty diverse in terms of how I felt. Um, and that too, Rutgers also has a pretty like diversified minority community, which I feel like would also, again, from like my point of view, um, again, it also felt diverse because I grew up in a pretty white town, in like northern New Jersey. Um, in terms of tokenism, I personally never felt it because I think I had a good diverse community, and also I took the time to find my community. Again, because we talked about like the complexity and diversity within even the South Asian community. Because there's so many countries, even within countries, there's so many communities, religions, stories, and even just experiences. Um, so I think like it took time to also just find my group of people, I guess, because um there would be a lot of like South Asian communities or like Hindu organizations or Indian organizations, etc. But I feel like growing up here, I'm not like the most fluent in my native tongue, so even like like communicating with students who were fluent, like sometimes I feel a gap with that too. So I think it's also just like finding your own community. So I think I'm grateful and thankful that I had like a supportive group of friends and community and professors. I think the only area where I sort of felt really out of place and maybe tokenism is more like in the academics, and I feel like that's so hard to tackle because it's like ingrained, and you'd have to really tackle the like the rules and like you have to go all the way up to like higher ups and then alter a lot of like rules that have been there for so long. And I felt like I could also see like a lot of my professors like struggling with academia too, and like I they like the responsibility that they have to follow um like the curriculum, but at the same time like they didn't align with it. So I could feel like that push and pull with like a lot of professors. And also like it was frustrating because a lot of like I'd have to take a lot of art history classes, which was required for my degree, but they would always make like the Western art history or European art history like mandatory. And I was like, why is the one South Asian or like one Asian art history class like not mandatory? So I think like definitely in terms of like curriculum is where I definitely felt like lack of representation and tokenism. Um, and even I could tell with professors that they would definitely feel that push and pull, like, and the struggle to like, I have this is what I have to follow as a professor, but I definitely don't align with that. Um, but yeah, this is my experience more from like student side, but yeah.
Shreya, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Shreya, congratulations on your
Thank you.
recent graduation. And thank you for joining this chai time with all of the design, mostly predominantly design educators. And then here you're a recent graduate. So I really am so proud of you for participating in this complicated, conversation and then listening and then contributing and then sharing us your perspective and how you grew up so I assume you're a visual communication designer or a graphic designer. You're still in the graphic design field. Is that so?
So I basically got my bachelor's of fine arts uh
Mm-hmm.
in visual arts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I did specific concentrations in painting and design.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's so wonderful. So thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective of how curriculum needs to change, right? Curriculum needs to change. Here we are talking about decolonizing the curriculum or decolonization in design. Um, but then if we don't address that in curriculum, then we are just simply talking, right? But we need to actually happen and that change needs to happen through curriculum. And so that's how and then one thing that you pointed out in terms of taking art history classes, there are lots of art history classes that are a requirement, but then certain art history classes, especially art history that comes from minoritized identities, that's just simply there as an elective. Like, it's not a requirement, it's an elective. And then so how many students will really take it? Oh, it's so difficult. I don't want to. So unless there is that sense of curiosity with the student, they won't really register for that class. So then how can curriculum really change and reflect what's going on in the world and really uplift multiculturalism? And I think that's what's lacking. So thank you for sharing
To
those.
jump in on that because one thing that I'm seeing a trend of, and I'm curious if other professors are seeing this, is an interest in integrating content from the Global South into foundational courses.
Mhm.
So if you're going to teach a class on how to use Adobe Illustrator and the elements and principles of pattern in design, use a study of Islamic tessellation tiles from the mosques of Iran and have our students create their own tessellation tiles using Adobe Illustrator, or have foundational architecture courses have a study of mashrabiyah, lattice work as part of their foundational study of form. So then we're not only having Western ideals of design define what good design is, and we're actually learning the fundamentals from a variety of cultures that then stops us from separating like this is design history and then this is the other design history that's kind of exoticized to certain curiosities but not actually the real design.
True.
So I'm curious if any of you are seeing those trends.
True. I mean, that's a great question. Roshali, you had something to say, please.
Sabiha, I'm going to just add on to what you said, is this idea of inclusion, slowly building up within the curriculum, what is, primary as a requirement. And so I'm just giving this example. We, at the faculty, we are discussing about, modernism and postmodernism. And when we look at the non-Western world, the term modernism itself in art history is contested. So what are we going to do? The idea is that the institution is open, to look at such alternative modernisms and try to include them. And I think that is a good step, just to begin with. Even as electives are there, it's not that the option doesn't exist, but including it slowly, maybe block by block, within the larger narrative. I think that's a good step. That's one. And just to add on to what even Shreya mentioned about art history being mandatory, and the subjects which are included within it, or options which you need to explore. I think the interest within the student triggers a lot of a need for transition, and I think that is something we can also focus on. That acts like a good element to collaborate and to propose something, which in the long run can be included as a mandatory course. So I think that it's a slow process, undoubtedly so.
I mean, thank you, Sabiha and Roshali, for kind of going off of what Shreya was saying. And then when I was just thinking about what Sabiha said in terms of teaching cultural identity or heritage and whatnot in the classroom. But then there is also challenges, right? Like not everybody wants to do that. It's very difficult to do it. When I first started teaching in 2009, and then also as an grad assistant at UIUC in 2007, it was very hard because not everybody were talking about culture or sociocultural politics or even sociocultural heritage or whatever that you want to call, like, the term. For some reason, I'm blanking. But then it was very tough because I found myself the only person talking about it, and I was bringing out stuff from anthropology and sociology, and because not everybody were talking about it in design. But now it's changed, of course. But when I talk about it now in class, like right now, students were creating designs, type design based on my cultural heritage and their cultural heritage. And I know that this one professor that I interacted with who teaches at GW, Asavari Kulkarni, she's a part of Sadea as well. And she's introduced Rangoli designs as a Rangoli, as a grid. And then students are looking at the grid that Rangoli has, and then all of the motifs that Rangoli can create to do type design. So then slowly, I think these are the changes that we need to bring in, and then add our own contribution, write our own histories into that curriculum. And as I'm talking to you all, and I've been like thinking parallelly as well, and be like, that's a chai time topic. Like, how do we address curriculum as South Asian educators? So, what are the new or innovative methodologies that we can use and adopt and bring it into curriculum where people can read this and be like, oh, maybe I could adopt this as well. Even perhaps non-South Asians educators can also adopt. I mean, even though we want to own our own histories, own our own identities, but then we also want to think about how can other faculty members can also learn and adopt, because that's what we are doing. We are not familiar with Bauhaus principles while growing up, and then we are trying to teach as well. So that's kind of like very ironic when it's like, what is less is more? I don't know what less is more. So, but then here we are trying to adopt that and trying to teach and looking at space in a totally different way, right? So, and I think it's about time that these histories kind of find its own, like it becomes like a tapestry and a quilt, right? So I think it's about time that we bring our own narratives and our own history into curriculum, and we all have to do it together, right? Yeah.
I think to add to that, Archana, I think you're correct, and I'm adding just a bit. In depth, what we do is we have been working with like Silas Munro like BIPOC Design History, and Polymode, I think one of his other initiatives. And what's her name? Randa Hadi that we invited here. So we have been collaborating together to recreate our whole history, like design history curriculum, like 4 courses altogether. And I think what we are initiating is we are creating like a website which is full of these resources, but the students can also add things. So it's more like I think in architecture they have done something like that before in 60s, 70s, like where like postmodernism was very influential. So what we are doing is we are trying to empower our students from different culture to also say what they find in that thing. So it's not just what we are teaching in the classroom is the only strand of history. So we call it like the histories of global design. So it's more like so they're talking about their own stuff. So they're not comparing them side by side. They're just saying that they're all in a flux. So I think that's a very good initiative. And I think the students are getting more and more. Even in typography, we had like this, I call it like a 3-minute typography breakfast when there is a morning class or like typography snack in the afternoon class. So they have to dig in something related to their culture or their identity. So they have to give like a very short 3-minute speech to the class by saying why is it so important to him or her, and why is it why is it not being explored. So we're not talking about something like a traditional graphic design or typography piece, but they're talking about something which is a little, not so traditionally smooth or like sophisticated, but something about their culture. So they're also sharing it with other students of other identities. So not saying that this is good or bad, rather they're saying this also exists. I think that's the touch point the students really like these days. And I think our students are getting more because there is a lot of microaggression for like our international students when they're in the class. They always like, I have so much to tell, but I can't. So that premise, we just created that premise. And hopefully by next 4 or 5 years, it is an ongoing process. So this course is not never static. The course is always evolving. And I think that's what I like about it. So a lot of faculty from our department, as I said, like Silas Monroe, Randa, and like educators like those they're all collaborating together to create like a collaborative course. So yeah, I'm just excited like how it goes. And in the chat I say like we started with this Dana Abdullah's lecture. I think that really demystified the idea of like one strand or one linear pathway of a history. So
I think we all have to collaborate. I think that again, going back to that question of collaborations, I think as South Asians or like we collaborate with each other, collaborate with folks from diverse cultures. I think through collaborations and storytelling of histories is where we can start doing something new, right? And then so that's something to offer for our students, offer for the design world, something that I mean, I'm just thinking about all of the stuff that we've been talking today, and then so what are the new pathways that we can look forward to? Right? I mean, Mohammed, you were talking about this collaboration that DAP is having with Polymode, right? And then Sabiha, you're a part of Laraform Archive, and for a while I was serving on the board of PTTA at the beginning of this year, and PTTA has also collaborated with South Asian Design Educators Alliance, and we did an adathon last summer. So, and PGTA is actually working with Laraform Archive. I mean, they're like, the sister organization. But then, so how, I mean, these kind of entities or organizations have to exist for us minorities to thrive, right? But then how can we find our own path? Sometimes we feel like, okay, we need our own path. That doesn't mean we go off and start our own archive, which I don't know whether we can support. That's a lot of work. But then collaborating with these archives, right? And then be like, so how can we enhance right? How Mohammed is talking about collaborating in terms of curriculum with Polymode. So collaborating with archives. And I'm assuming Rishali also has something as well in terms of artistry, in terms of collaboration. Because I'm also looking at various other collaborators as I'm looking at the piece posters as well. And in my classroom, I talk about food, and then how I use food as a metaphor to bring in so students can share their own stories and create information design type and whatnot. Um, but then again, how can we empower ourselves as South Asian design educators, to feel more free, to feel more authentic, to feel that we are less taxed, understood, accepted, and in the end respected? Is there any last thoughts that you want to add as we wrap up chai time?
Well, I'll just say I'm I'm really grateful to all of you for investing in these relationships. It's my first time joining you all in this format, and I feel very grateful to be part of an ecosystem of educators and recent graduates like Shreya to just know who each other are so we can help amplify each other's work. And for those of you like Archana who are in more maybe isolated parts of the design ecosystem, to know that you're not alone, that none of us are alone, and where we can leverage our support for each other. So thanks for giving me a lot to think about, and I'm looking forward to building with you all over time.
Thank you, Sabiha. It's a joy that you joined us. I saw you on LinkedIn and I was like, "Yay, that's awesome." And then, so that's wonderful to see you today. Anyone else have last thoughts as we wrap up? Vishali?
I think we should have this session again after 6 months to see, where we are trying to work on. Something will come up by then, I'm sure. But I think this itself is a good step, to have even 1 hour where we are showing this attempt that, something needs to come up. For me as an art historian and curator, I always look between people and a space as a collaborating, ground. And institutions and people, maybe South Asia, specific, or even bringing in a wider dialogue so when I work on environment, environment is for everyone. So it's not just Southeast Asia. And then having artists from this region and from others, I think that itself is a good osmotic space. But yes, I think things like these are a beginning point. And, just to gauge how it goes ahead, I think is a good track to follow.
Shreya?
I just wanted to say, I'm really glad I joined. I was a little nervous to join because I know like it's mostly for educators, but it was really nice hearing you all speak. And also our education is something I really want to like move forward in with my career and eventually be a professor. Because I've had a lot of amazing professors, but also some professors who I maybe didn't get along with, but I think that encouraged me to like, you know, be a professor and help students when I'm older and more experienced. But it was really amazing um and inspiring really to hear you all speak. I was a little nervous to join, but I'm glad I did.
Shreya, we are so happy. We are so happy. I'm so delighted to just hear you speak. And then your interest in joining academia, and being one of us. And when you are ready to apply for grad school, you're welcome to email us. You're welcome to chat with us, and we'd be more than happy to guide you. We need more people. We need a lot of representation. So we need more people in design, so people like you, like, the next generation would also wanna would like, you be the role model for folks, right? So please, I'm so happy to hear what you said. And thank you so much for joining, and more power to you.
Thank you, thank you. That means a lot.
Anyone else like Sana, Mohammed, Wendy?
I thank you all for joining, and I think you can also think about like who are the other friends that you might have to join us in the next session. I think that will be wonderful. We regularly meet. Also, we have other events. I think Archana will tell. So yeah, feel free to join with your students as well. I think that's another way. Yeah, Vishali was talking about the osmotic state. I think that's what. Let's make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Sana, Wendy.
Yeah, no, I think these were some great conversations, and I think it would be one day if we could all have it in person, that would be great as well, having a chai time, I don't know, in person. But yeah, thank you for hosting, Archana. These are really important conversations, and I'm looking forward to more future conversations.
Thank you, Sana. I'm so glad that you all are a part of Sadea, right? So I'm very grateful to all of you. I'm not sure if Wendy can talk, but Wendy, so glad that you can join us as well. So wrapping up chai time, and this is our last session for this year. So thank you for being Sadea members, and we look forward to next year. You all have a wonderful holiday season. If you're traveling, safe travels. Be safe with your family and enjoy. Have a wonderful, great holiday. And then see you all next year. We begin the next year with Design Charcha. And we will soon have a guest as well that we are going to release it on social media. And we also have Sadeya Khabar as our newsletter. So please sign up for Sadeya Khabar, which is going to be released in the first week of January. So we'll have the first three events, and for the first 3 months will be released. And if you want to be a part of Sadeya, please join us. And Shreya, if you want to be a part of the student mentorship committee, please let us know. We would love for student feedback. And thank you everybody for joining. And like I mentioned, stay safe and have a wonderful holiday. And Happy New Year. I'm saying it very soon, but Happy New Year. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.